Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino, and I am here with our other host, Joe LaVacca. You can find us both on Instagram at Joe Gambino DPT for myself, at Strength and Motion _PT for LaVacca over there. You can also find this podcast on Instagram, YouTube, Cups of Joe _PT, and Instagram Beyond Pain Podcast. There, if you'd like to work with us, we do have an application form in the show notes. Please feel free to do so. If you have any questions or topics that you would like to hear about, please feel free to DM us, let us know, and we will add them to our queue. Joe boy, welcome back.
It is good to be back, and it's a special Friday because I am actually in the city, in the gym, in the office. So I'm hoping that Riverside does its magic of filtering out any background noise for the listeners this week. If you do catch a little bit, we got a lot of big personalities in the gym. I do apologize, but I will do my best to speak loudly and clearly so no one misses any of these wonderful gems we have to offer, Mr. Cho. But I am feeling good, man. The Knicks won last night. They closed out the series. I don't like the way they closed it out. I'll just celebrate the win. I'll take it. I'm not going to be one of those New Yorkers who's like complaining, but they got outplayed that whole series, man. It was not pretty. What'd you think? Did you watch it?
I feel like I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I feel like even just from watching last season, they just every win that they had was just fought out and just they had to tough out every W they got. So we'll see. Hopefully they make a little bit of a run. It's definitely fun with Knicks postseason basketball. So I will start tuning in a little bit more. So because this is the only real time that I get the chance to. I really actually even end up watching basketball. So
yeah, I would say I don't really watch basketball until the playoffs. I'll follow them. I'll keep in touch. You know, I'll check stat lines and things like that. How's everybody doing? Playoff basketball is really entertaining because I feel like a lot of those games in the regular season, when you're doing 82, even in baseball, man, when you're doing 162 games, you can't play all out every single game. Not every game matters. I'm sorry. Like there's just some nights that you just take a day off, long travel, you're going across the country, so I get it. But everyone typically shows up. I love the playoffs because they're really physical. It almost like brings me back to those days of like what basketball used to be, just like 24/7. But it is fun. I do have to laugh at the script, though, for the Knicks, where Jalen Brunson has a career-ending ankle injury every seemingly third quarter or fourth quarter, goes back to the Knicks locker room, just picks up a new ankle or foot, puts it on, and then comes back out and scores, 35 points when we need it the most. So hopefully, I just want to win a couple games against the Celtics, man. They blew us out every game this season. I just want to have it be a respectable series. Like, do what the Pistons did to the Celtics. Right? What the Pistons did to us, I want us to do that to the Celtics, and I will walk away very happy. And then maybe we make a move. Giannis might be on the table for next year, so maybe we make a move there.
maybe. Well, I'm with you. I'm hoping for. I want them to go as far as possible. Make basketball playoffs a little bit more interesting. I was also rooting for the Lakers, but they're not quite there anymore. They out in 5. So the Knicks are all I got left.
Were you rooting for the Lakers because you just happen to be a shadow Laker fan, or is there a LeBron connection or something?
Nah, I've just been kind of always enjoying LeBron's career. So I just kind of, shadow rooting for whatever team he's on. So it's always whenever there's someone who's like a generational talent, it's always fun to watch, right? I mean, I never really liked Tom Brady, but he was, probably some of the best football that you would be able to witness in our generation, right? So, we have Patrick Mahomes now. But we'll see how his career stacks up to Brady.
Yeah, the problem is none of these players are on our teams. I'm waiting for the generational player for the Giants. I'm sure you're waiting for one for the Chargers, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess
we had
hopefully
one, but it didn't at the Chargers, but it didn't pan out to any Super Bowls. We had LT, and he was
that is
the
true.
monster
That
as
is
at a
true.
running back position. And we had great seasons, but nothing in the playoffs. So
I hear you.
yeah,
I hear you. All right,
long
man. Well, what are we talking about today? I feel like we've been floating this one for a little bit.
yes, yes, we are talking about the elbow, and we'll kick it off easy. We don't necessarily have to talk about any specific diagnoses today, but I may be curious to hear your opinion on what are the more common things that you see around the elbow with the people that you see.
Yeah, I was about to say, is there any other diagnosis? Wait, it says paused on the top. Oh, now we're recording again.
Yeah,
Are we good? All right,
yeah,
I'll
we're
edit
good.
this. All right. Anyway, so I didn't realize there was any other diagnosis other than medial and lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. And I've still haven't met too many people with tennis elbow who play tennis and golfer's elbow who plays golf. I'm wondering, before we actually really get going, have you actually seen the connection here?
Maybe more so with not really with golf. I haven't come across too many golfers that are like, yeah, I have medial elbow pain, but I think these elbow issues with racket sports tend to pop up a lot more.
Yeah, and specifically though, I don't see it a lot with on the one side versus the other. Like you mentioned, racket sports or overhead sports. I mean, we could even probably throw throwing sports in there. The elbow doesn't seem to really play by a particular set of rules, even when it comes to agreement with treatment across the board. And one of the things I've sort of been reading a little bit more of lately is just how long these things actually take to go away. And I think even the hint that they might be self-limiting, even like meaning taking care of themselves, almost from like an autoimmune perspective. So I don't really see too many elbow issues. Diagnosis wise, it still would fall into the most common of medial and lateral epicondylitis. But what I do try to convey when they do come in through the door is, hey, look, we're going to treat this exactly like we would any other tendon in the body. We're going to go after it from heavy loading. We're going to go after it from heavy isometrics. We're going to modify maybe grip or certain activities that you have at the gym. And even when we do that, it's still probably going to take a really long time to fully resolve. So we want to make sure that we're not aggravating anything with what we do, keeping those symptoms pretty much baseline rather than spiking them. But is that something that you've seen as a pattern too? I don't know if I really see somebody for elbow pain for a year or a year plus, but have these been things that, when you get these calls virtually, that they nag for quite a while?
Yeah, it's I think a hit or miss. I mean, I had someone recently that I was working with who had some like lingering elbow stuff for like 4 months, and then I mean maybe it was just perfect timing because when we started working together after a month, it started to resolve pretty well. And he's had a little bit of that lingering issue in the past. I worked with him many moons ago, and we were able to successfully kind of build up the elbow, and it just kind of recently came back for him. And then I have some people where it takes a little bit longer, where 3, 4, 5, 6 months kind of goes by, and it's slow progressing. Where yeah, we're seeing changes. They may be able to feel like they can do a little bit more effort or work before that tissue starts to be irritated. But for it to like really feel like it's 100%, they're not noticing it anymore, takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think from the one thing I try to rule out with most people is if we think that there's some sort of like bony pathology. But again, that's typically, again, from my understanding, going to happen with a lot of our youth sports clients. So we do want to make sure that the proper channels are being sort of evaluated. We're taking into account the person in front of us. How did they hurt themselves? Was it just the beginning of a season, like spring training? They started throwing a lot, or they started playing tennis a lot. They're in that, sort of like teenage age frame, maybe even a little bit younger. So we do want to make sure that there's no bony injury, there's no growth plate injuries, because
Mhm.
I think that would be really important to sort of like keep an eye out for. Probably when they get to our age, or maybe seeing me, or maybe even yourself virtually, I would probably say the only things that usually come to mind are any nerve entrapment type issues of the radial nerve or of the ulnar nerve or median nerve. So screening those out with some nerve testing and tensioners or sliders, however you want to do it.
Mhm.
The thing that I always tell people to look out for, clinicians to look out for, is that we're not looking for sensitivity with those tests. Because I do a nerve test and it hurts, it stings, it doesn't feel great. So that's not
Sure.
what we're looking for. We're looking for clear asymmetry in that range of motion or a clear reproduction of symptoms. And that's what would make me sort of like say, okay, maybe this is a little bit more nerve related. Maybe that takes me up the route to the cervical spine a little bit more. But if people are just like, yeah, that stretches or that pulls really hard, that's not enough for me to say, yeah, let's take nerve sliders, let's take a spinal stabilization or mobilization sort of like approach here. Is there anything else that you look for when it comes to the elbow that would take you away from the elbow as far as assessment goes, like looking at the neck or looking at the thoracic spine? I've heard a few things even about the scapula. Just wondering if you kind of take that into consideration.
I certainly do. I mean, nerve tension was a big one. I definitely was gonna bring that up because I think that one can kind of always pop up in a sense and recreate similar symptoms. So I think that those need to be kind of ruled out or looked at, and those nerve tensioners can definitely give you some issues. And there's a lot of places in and around the elbow and the arm that you can get those entrapments. So it doesn't always bring me to the neck, but might bring me to certain areas to at least test and try to rule out to see if those areas need to be worked. But I always will look above. I think the knee and the elbow are kind of similar joints where the things that go on around it, especially for like overuse injuries, can play a part. I'm sure if you're constantly throwing or you're constantly playing golf or you're using your hands at work for whatever reason, it's a very repetitive fashion. You can develop these elbow issues, but it's pretty commonly comes along with either poor scapular motion, poor spine mobility, poor shoulder mobility. So making sure that all those things around it, I think, just kind of helps with the way that the whole arm functions, so that you may not be overutilizing. And one thing I actually see, which I find interesting, is people who have elbow issues sometimes just like making some like minor coaching cues. Like if they have pain with rows, if you just like have them like try to finish a little bit more like by like pulling with your back and just try to like finish with like the back of the arm going up versus trying to bring your hands up. Like little coaching cues like that can like oh, I don't even feel my elbow anymore. Right. So there's I think a little bit of being able to make sure movement happens well, more, the shoulder, the scapula, stuff like that can definitely play an impact in some of these repetitive injuries that end up popping up.
Yeah, and I like the coaching cues a lot. And I think that one of the things I had read a while ago about some of the ways people grip when they have these types of injuries around the elbow is that it's not like kind of like totally symmetrical, right? So if you make a nice tight fist, my wrist, fist, fingers, forearm kind of like fit into this straight line. Whereas sometimes those people with those elbow injuries will sort of like deviate in either direction. That could be where maybe some tape or something comes in. I've done that before where, hey, look, if you feel some stretching or pulling on the tape on one side of the joint versus the other, hey, just correct that, get that wrist back in neutral as we're doing our carries, our rows, our pushes, our presses. And at least temporarily, that might help them alleviate some symptoms. Definitely take a look at the shoulder, scapula. I mean, that just kind of gives us maybe more ideas on how to keep loading that arm that's sensitive. It's very similar to the knee. Hey, I'm going to maybe take a peek at the foot because I want you to load your calf. I want you to load your foot. Hey, I'm going to take a look at your hip because I want you to load your hip. I want you to load your spine, your core, whatever, because I want to keep people training as much as possible. The biggest thing that I've tried doing lately, or I've been a little bit more cognizant of, even when people are just training and feeling well, is that the grip is a big limiting factor for most people. And a lot of people don't want to do specific grip training. So, how do you address that? How are you addressing grip? Do you give any specific exercises for these clients? Because again, if we're comparing things, it sort of seems like the foot, right? Like nobody wants to strengthen their foot, and nobody wants to strengthen their freaking hand. So, what do you do with that?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that I tried to work direct either wrist work or grip strengthening stuff in there. So one would be just doing it directly as kind of like an active, not active rest in a sense, I guess we could call it. We're doing some lower body work, or maybe we're doing some upper body work, or maybe start at the end of the session, we do direct wrist work to strengthen the tissue. Could be mobility work, whatever that looks like for that person. But you could also, I think, fun way to sprinkle in some like grip work is with arm work. So, using thicker grips, using a towel, farmer's walks, doing like pinch grip stuff. Like you can sneak in some of this little extra grip work when people don't really even realize that they're doing like direct arm work at that point. So those are some ways that I kind of like sneaking it in there. And then, yeah, just like, hey, here's some direct work. I like to put it into their workouts because if you here's some stuff to do. I mean, they may do it. It really depends on the person and like how irritated it is and how much work they really need to get done. But you can always sneak those things in somewhere throughout a workout to make sure that they're actually getting done.
Yeah, mixing that up with the towels and different pinch grips, I mean, that's great. And I just sort of will randomly do that with a lot of my own training, even when I do have carries program. Sometimes I'm at the gym and it's the one in my apartment and the dumbbells only go up to about 50 pounds or so. So I'm like, okay, how can I make this a little bit more challenging? Let me try to grab them on the top. Let me try to use a towel, wrap it around it. Just something that's going to make me work just a little bit harder, given the constraints of, what I have. I think the other thing that I try to do too is show people they need to work grip, right? And I kind of make it meaningful. So I have a grip strength tester in the office. And when I first got it, it became a novelty, right? Like everyone's walking around like, oh, who's got the strongest grip? Who's got the strongest grip? Now, what I sort of like about it, and I don't know how valid it is because it just gamifies things for me a little bit, but the particular one I have, it was not expensive either, which is why I question how valid it is. But I can put in someone's age, if they're male or female, and then based on the reading, it'll actually say weak, normal, or strong, given your age or whatever. Now, again, I don't know how it does this. It's an analog, but the thing that I just kind of keep going with it is when I plug in someone's information, and they see, their involved side is labeled as weak, they're like, I got to work on this. I didn't realize this was an opportunity or it was that different. The other thing I like about the grip thing is I can change how you hold it with your fingers, right? So sometimes a lot of people can compensate, right? Athletes especially. I can squeeze that grip strength thing, really probably use, like my Spider-Man muscles, right? Like really kind of get through the midline there. And maybe I overcompensate with the thumb. So if we see that it's kind of symmetrical, then what I'd like to do with people is say, okay, you know what? I'm going to have you just squeeze just with these two fingers, your pinky and your ring finger. What's that one look like side to side? And, again, not always, but typically when it's on the inside part of the elbow, that grip with the pinky and the ring finger, especially, either reproduces their pain pretty quickly or shows a really big deficit side to side. So then it's just like, hey, look, you got a deficit here. Really simple to clean up. Let's start working on grip, but let's really think about finding pinky and ring, like you just gave your coaching cues. Hey, when you go home, this is why I kind of want you to do that band work specifically just to fatigue with that side. And this is why we want to think about, different maybe ways to help our grip so we can keep training. So if you are doing pull-ups and it's aggravating, hey, here's a strap. If you are doing deadlifts and it's aggravating, hey, here's a strap. Because when that grip is off, the only thing you can do usually from a gym perspective is go lighter. And then you go lighter, then it's going to take away from your pushes, your pulls, your deadlifts, your squats, or anything else. So this is where I always will say, hey, if you're already training and you've developed this pain, get some straps to keep everything else at a high enough signal. And I think that also kind of keeps people motivated that, hey, look, I can work around this and then I can work directly on it, whether or not we put it in their programming or directly at home. But that's me in person. Are you trying to do, or how do you assess grip or, things like that when you're doing anything virtual? Do you have any go-to tests or scales or anything like that?
No, not as specific as, using a dynamometer or something like that would go. But I would say, I mean, there's ways, like you were talking about, like someone who's holding something with like their wrist back like that. So in those cases, right, if I'm like seeing, like if we're doing like kettlebell work, that's like a common place where I'll see it, where someone will like hold it with their wrist and extension. To me, that's a sign of like poor irradiation to the shoulder, poor grip, right? Like, so those are things that we'll start to coach through. I mean, I don't, if I'm finding somebody who has wrist pain directly, I'll use isometrics to kind of see, is it like painful? Do they feel like one side is, I'll have them like report to me, okay, hey, well, let's do this, ramp it up as hard as you can, and just tell me, does one side feel stronger than the other? So it's a little bit more subjective, but I'm still able to get, I think, a good enough data piece. And then for someone like that, regardless, I'm probably going to be sprinkling some of this work to strengthen the area. Regardless, I'm not just going to be like, oh, well, assume it's strong or not. So that's probably where I am with that stuff. But like coaching with like kettlebells and stuff like that, making sure that the wrist is straight, the knuckles are pointing to the ceiling, all the fingers are there. I've seen people carry like kettlebells and like like the pinky doesn't want to like grab or something like that, right? So in those cases, there will be the cues will definitely be okay. How do we start to make sure that we're utilizing all those things and build it up from there? So
Yeah, sounds perfect. Let me ask you this.
perfect. Oh, look at that.
Big thought that a lot of people have is I can just get an injection in this. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, what I tell people is they're hit or miss. I've seen some people get them and it helps, and I've seen some people get them and they don't help. And I really think also depends on how stubborn their pain is. Right, if we're going 3, 4, weeks and there's been no change, then we're probably gonna have to have a conversation of, what can we do here to see if we can get over the pain hump. Right, if nothing that we would expect to work. That stuff should start to make at least some sort of variable change, in my opinion, right? Or we should start to see that you can tolerate more load. And if none of that's happening, then I think it's worthwhile to either go explore what a doctor might say or an injection or whatever the next steps would look like for that person. I don't think there's anything wrong with, yeah, I think there's a lot of people I talk to is like, I never want a shot. I can't do this, right? Like there's something negative about it. But I think in the right situation is that these can really speed up the process for somebody if it's done and there's a good clinical reason for why we're doing it. We're not just jumping to the gun and relying on them, which some people do, is they just rely on shots in their shoulders, their elbows, or whatever to keep the pain at bay. And then there's this constant like, oh, I can only have this many shots in this much time. I have to wait. The pain comes back. Having a blend of these two things can be really beneficial for some people.
Yeah, I think I've heard two different things, right? I mean, in the smaller studies, it doesn't seem like there is a right or wrong direction necessarily. But in some of the bigger case reports and analysis I've seen, it seems that staying away from elbow injections at all costs is actually probably the better direction for people long term. And that's always the hardest thing, right? Measuring the short term sort of like gratification of something against the long term repercussions. And that's that whole delayed gratification thing that like I try to teach Avery. I'm sure you try to teach your kids, right? Like it's not everything about right now, because if you get everything you want right now, it's probably not going to set you up for success long term. So it kind of always goes back around to the same idea for me with all these cortisone injections is like, well, how do we know that there's really inflammatory marker in that tissue? I mean, we could take a guess, but when the chronicity of a lot of these things has been lasting, well, it's not like the same as it being like at 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 14 days. So is it just a lot of water content? Is it just a lot of edema? Is it just a lot of like imbalance in like this, like, watery matrix soup that you have inside of all your body parts, right? Because you dump an anti-inflammatory in there and there's no or not significant amounts of inflammation. I think this is where that long-term like repercussion happens. So I've only seen a couple of instances of cortisone reaction in my career too, where the skin actually bleaches, it turns white, the tissues actually atrophy in the area. And of the 4 or 5 I've seen, 3 or 4 of them have just been solely at the medial elbow. So again, that's a small sample size. One was some girl's patella in Colorado, actually. And like everyone was like, yeah, we don't know what happened. And I'm like, did you ever get a cortisone injection? She was like, yeah, why? And I'm like, well, your skin's bleached. You have atrophy of your fat pad. This is just going to take time for you to come back. I mean, sorry, I don't have any exercises that regrow fat pads. This is going to be bracing, modification. Don't squat too deep. Don't do this too much. And then hopefully that'll come back over time. So if we can at all costs, I would probably, again, still go the route of, hey, can we brace this? Can we strap this? Can we give you something like even those things I see people wear around their forearms? They look like, the cuffs, right? Have we tried every single thing before we go that route of the injection? And then even then, I'm still probably going to educate them and say, look, just like what Dan Pope was saying, right? Like my job is just give you information. This has a higher probability of leading to worse outcomes, but it's up to you if you want to do it. And then sort of like giving them that space to make the decision, because if they do have something super important to them, they have the PGA Tour this weekend and there's their best chance of winning it. Hey, who am I to stand in their way? But if it's something that they can hold off or maybe, wait till next year or something like that, then, that's what I'm going to try to do.
I mean, that's fair. That's interesting. And I wonder too, first thing I think is, what happens after people get these shots and they feel better, right? Do they continue working on it or do they just stop? Like, what does that follow-up journey look like? So I think there's always questions to why something long-term may or may not work. But like I said, with I haven't seen, all this stuff in quite some time where people getting shots and stuff like that since I was at Perfect Stride. Uh, and it's always been just like hit or miss. It's like I feel like people going for shots and you just have like a 50-50 chance of it working. And I don't know if it's because of the diagnostic tools or if it's just because they just decide to do, the doctor just decides to do it for everybody and then hope it works out or not. But, I always just find it interesting with these studies and, you can't really control the long term, outcome. So I wonder really what leads to these issues down the line or not.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that's what, I think I kind of opened up like that. Like if this is if a lot of these elbow things are self-limiting and they take anywhere between 8 to 12 months, with direct treatment or without, then, typically I don't see people that long. So they could drop out of PT or training or rehab, 3 months in and being like, hey, this is bullshit. I don't want to wait another 5 to 9 months to feel better. I'm just going to go get a shot. Now, I don't know what that means. And yeah, maybe they get back to training. Maybe they're like, wow, I'm so glad that I didn't listen to Joe and this is great. Or yeah, wow, Joe was right. I never really actually regained the strength there. And now my whole sort of like left side is atrophied on that side. And it's harder to grip a racket. It's harder to do pull-ups. So now I just don't do those things anymore. And then ipso facto, my elbow feels better anyway. So I guess it really is like, what's the goal of your treatment? Is it just to not have elbow pain? Or is it to continually to maintain function and strength and long-term effect? And I guess that also is very individualized to people. And, some of the stuff we were talking about last week too.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it comes back to like every episode that we've probably chatted about. It always comes back to goals and what that person needs and why they're doing it and the risk reward, to everything that can be done and stuff like that. So anything else that we have left to talk in and about the elbow here?
No, I think that's a good opening salvo. I mean, we can maybe dive into some more of like golf specific stuff in the next couple of weeks. Weather's getting nicer. I know people want to get out and play golf and people want to get out and run and all that other fun stuff. But we just talked a lot about running and had Vikash on. So maybe we dive a little bit deeper in the coming weeks and kind of go from there. But I think that was sort of like a lot of my big general ideas. I'm going to approach it like everything else in the body tendon wise. See how it does. Like we mentioned, the coaching, the isometrics, the modification. Maybe, this is just like an orthotic for the foot. Maybe where straps and things like that come back for the hand. But we want to kind of keep helping you move forward.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, that's all I got to you. Why don't you take us home?
All right. Well, Joe, love you. Thanks for another great episode. Listeners, we love you. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.